So let's talk about capital calls. A lot of that's been happening in the syndication space. Been
Yep.
dicey with the debt markets, rising interest rates, causing a lot of tricky situations for people that own commercial real estate, multifamily properties. So I know you put a call out to your whole network recently to touch on these topics. A lot of them are
Yeah.
worried about it. And so, what are some of the things that you talked about on that call as to what you guys are doing to mitigate the potential for having to do a capital call?
A great point, John. This is very relevant. And at the time we're recording this, we're at end of April here, 2023. And in the last 8 to 12 weeks, there's a ton of sponsors across the country doing capital calls. We have never done a capital call on any deal, on any property in our entire portfolio. And we don't plan to have to do any capital calls, any deals in all of 2023 or 2024. And as an example of, and I'll go into why capital calls are happening, but the reason we know it's happening is because we've had over 4,000 plus different individuals invest with us so far. Many of these investors are investing with different sponsors across the country. We launched a deal end of February, and we were having really low, we did like a soft launch a couple days before our formal blast to everybody. And we typically have a lot more commitments at that time. Well, we were getting a bunch of investors reaching out saying, hey, Zach, we like the deal. We like the market. We like you guys, but I'm getting hit with capital calls from other people. I'm on the sidelines. And we're like, oh, crap. The industry is getting a black eye right now because a lot of sponsors are doing capital calls. And for those who don't know what a capital call is, it means maybe you invested in a deal 2 or 3 years ago, and now the property is running low on cash liquidity. So the sponsor asks for a capital call, meaning that investors have to put up more money, infuse more money into the deal. Investors obviously don't like that. It's not a good thing. You're getting diluted. You have to put more money into the property. And it's been impacting everybody. And we were hearing this was happening. So we made it very clear. We wanted to get that out there. Hey, we're not doing capital calls and we don't plan to do any. And so what we did is we did like a state of the portfolio webinar, and we blasted it out to everybody on our list, and we did it live. Okay. So it was like it was about an hour and 45 minutes where we went through our entire strategy since we started, why we're not having to do capital calls. And there was a few big points. Okay. The biggest reason we're not having to do capital calls is that we're not over leveraged. Most of the groups doing capital calls right now took at least 80 to 85% leverage or loan to value on these deals. They only have 15 to 20% down payment of equity in the deal. We've always been between 60 to 70% loan to value. Okay, meaning you have a 30 to 40% cash down payment. We have a few deals. The highest leverage we ever took was 75% loan to value. Never gone over that. 75% is still healthy. You got 25% equity in the deal. So a lot of these groups, it took highly leveraged loans. And as interest rates have skyrocketed the last 12 months, they've gone up at a faster rate than any time in the last 40 years. Since the 1980s, the Fed has been doing these aggressive interest rate hikes, increasing the Fed funds rate over 450 basis points the last 12 months. Most of these loans for value add multifamily are on what you call floating or adjustable rate debt, right? Because that's what provides the financing for the renovation dollars. And it's the best type of loan product truly for a value add strategy. And we still think it is. And we're still doing floating rate debt. And I'll go into why. But there's a certain way to structure the debt, and there's a responsible way to structure the debt. The first thing is you have to take lower leverage. Okay. So we could have taken 85% loan to value on a lot of these deals, but we didn't. We intentionally would pare back loan proceeds, raise more cash, so we're not over leveraged. Okay. The second thing is that we've always purchased 3-year interest rate caps on every single loan we've done. Okay. That means that on the front end, I'm purchasing a cap that no matter what happens with the Fed, the indexes, the treasury, my interest rate cannot exceed that cap. Okay. A lot of people, the people right now who are in real trouble didn't put a cap on their deal at all. Okay. And I know some of those people. And I think recently there was a foreclosure of 4 assets in Houston. This is like big national news. And I just talked to somebody who knows the guy and did some of his loans. And he had 80 to 85% loan to value. And then he put pref equity on top of that. So he was even more leveraged, and he didn't have an interest rate cap. And so it's like, what do you expect? Okay. You're asking for a doomsday scenario. And that's why it's not fair to just bash multifamily. That was a very irresponsible, reckless way to structure a deal. And I talked to a guy who's very familiar with it, who said, those foreclosures have been in process since last summer. And so right when the rates started hiking, this guy was immediately in trouble. Okay. And again, I don't know what's true, what's not true. That's what you're hearing, but that's Wall Street Journal national news. So I don't want to bash anybody, but it's pretty relevant news. And so that's a perfect example of setting a deal up for failure. So we've always had 3-year interest rate caps in every deal. The third biggest thing, John, in addition to low leverage 3-year interest rate caps, we've always raised significant cash reserves at the property level. Okay, so ever since we started, we will raise liquid cash reserves, rainy day funds that are not allocated to anything. This is separate from CapEx, separate from interest reserves. It's just cash. And a few years ago, it's funny, some investors would criticize us. They would say, hey, I don't like how you're raising all this extra money, diluting the investor returns. And we would say, well, you know what? That's just how we underwrite the deal. Don't invest with us if you don't like it. And now that's one of the reasons why we're in good shape, right? Because we have plenty of cash liquidity at the asset level. And so what's happened, if you give people an illustration, for those of you who are watching on video, like in an underwriting model, you're assuming that your NOI stays above your interest rates, right? And then you have an interest rate cap up here. Okay, so you're always assuming your NOI is growing over your interest rate. What's happened with the floating rate debt and the Fed increasing rates so quickly, for a lot of these deals, interest rates shot up significantly all the way to your cap, okay, above your NOI. So a lot of deals across the country are negatively cash flowing because debt service and expenses are higher than NOI. If you don't have cash at the property level to cover that delta, you're in big trouble. Okay. And so what's happening for people doing capital calls is that they don't have cash at the property level. And so they're negatively cash flowing. They have to infuse more cash to pay the bills and pay the debt service. A lot of them, if you didn't have an interest rate cap, you're just toast. Forget it, because that interest rate is skyrocketing. You'll never be able to close the gap. And a lot of them did buy interest rate caps, but if you bought a 1 or 2 year cap and you bought a deal in the last 1 or 2 years, your cap is coming to expire soon. And so a lot of them that are doing capital calls are trying to bring in more money to buy a new cap before it expires. Okay. And if you look at agency loans, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, what they do is they require that you escrow very large amounts of cash reserves for the cap. Okay. So they're basically taking big chunks of your cash flow and they're escrowing it, taking it away from you to prepare for a cap that's coming up in 12 months. That has also wiped out a lot of cash flow for a lot of sponsors. We're about to buy a deal in Dallas right now. Their cap is coming up to expire. They've been getting just crushed from Freddie Mac escrowing these reserves, so it wiped out all their cash flow, and they're just trying to get out of the deal now before that interest rate cap expires. And so anyways, long story short is we went through that presentation and kind of showed investors how we're well positioned and how, because we have a very strong infrastructure for property management, construction management, supply chain, our whole strategy right now, John, is to increase the velocity of renovations. Okay, we're trying to crank through renovations as fast as we can because in Phoenix, Dallas, across the country, organic rent growth has decelerated significantly and normalized. You cannot count on organic rent growth to increase rents anymore. You have to do forced appreciation. You have to renovate units, provide a higher quality finish for tenants if you want to increase NOI. That's the only way to do it. Okay, so you have to crank through renovations, push rents, and we're still seeing really strong demand, and we're hitting all of our pro forma rents and exceeding them for renovated product. So the whole plan is racing against the clock. It's like I need to increase NOI enough so that before my interest rate cap comes up, even if interest rates don't come down, my NOI is high enough to qualify for a new loan, okay, so that I can pay off the first loan and I can use loan proceeds from the new loan to buy another 3-year interest rate cap. Okay, and so we've sold 11 deals since we've started. We bought 42 deals now. We've sold 11. The longest deal that we currently own, that we bought it in June of 2021. Okay, so our first interest rate cap doesn't expire until June of 2024. Okay, and so basically all the 2021 deals, the plan is get 90 to 100% renovated by the end of this year and then begin the refi process, okay, so that we can at least get out of those loans, buy a new cap. What we think will happen is that I was just talking to our banker this morning, and he said that JP Morgan is projecting 80% chance that there will be a 25 basis point increase to interest rates in May. And then they think that after May, that it'll flatline. And by the time this records, it might already be after that. So you guys will have better knowledge than me at this point. But they also think there may be one 25 basis point cut before the end of the year, and that the real cuts will start to happen next year, first half of next year. Once interest rates start to come down, cap rates will also compress and values will go up very quickly. Okay, so our whole plan is maximize NOI at these assets as a defensive measure so we can at least refi the loans, buy new caps. And if the interest rates get cut pretty quickly next year, then we should be in a good position to sell a lot of these 2021 and even 2022 assets because we've increased NOI significantly. Rates will be low. We can get good sales valuations. So that's kind of the strategy right now, is weather the storm with your cash reserves, your interest rate caps, and the ability to renovate units on schedule and on budget is critical right now. People who can't do that are going to be in trouble because there's no other way to increase your NOI.